Hi there. Welcome to Raising Mommy. Today's show is brought to you by Emory Women's Center at Findley. As part of Emory Healthcare, the largest and most comprehensive hospital system in Atlanta, Emory Women's Center at Findley offers women the highest level of care. Whether you're looking for a gynecologist for your annual well woman checkup, or an obstetrician for pregnancy care, or a reproductive health specialist, Emory Women's Center at Findley is known for outstanding women's health care. Our physicians provide general gynecological care for women of all ages, including all dimensions of pregnancy and prenatal care, as well as preventative women's health education and management. You can depend on unparalleled medical care delivered by specialists who work with you to develop a personalized treatment plan. For patient appointments, call 404-778-3401. Emory Women's Center at Findley is located at 12,000 Findley Road, Johns Creek, Georgia, 30097. Hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to Raising Mommy, a podcast sanctuary where moms can come to listen, share, learn, and grow. I am your host, Kimberly Tyson, vegan blogger for eatplantsforlife.com and mom of two. On today's podcast, I have the pleasure of chatting with Dr. Jim Taylor, author of 17 books, including Positive Pushing, How to Raise a Successful and Happy Child. Dr. Taylor is internationally recognized as an authority on the psychology of sport and parenting. He is a public speaker, a consultant for various U.S. team sports, and has worked closely with world-class athletes of various sports. Like the book title, today's Real Chat segment is called How to Raise a Successful and Happy Child. Dr. Taylor, what was your goal in writing the book Positive Pushing?
Well, I think because growing up, pushing has gotten a bad rap. And people think about pushing, they think of the negative side of it. And I see it's absolutely essential that parents push their kids in a positive way, of course. And so I really wanted to show parents that it's okay to push because, again, it carries so much baggage. But it needs to be done the right way for kids to develop in positive and healthy ways.
As it relates to raising our children, how are success and happiness related?
Well, unfortunately, our parenting culture has caused parents to think that they have to make a choice. I either need to drive my kids unmercifully to be successful and get straight A's and get into good colleges and have good careers, or that we can have our kids be happy, and in which case they'll be happy and they'll get along with people, but they won't have successful careers and so on. And what I try to really convey is that success and happiness are mutually inclusive categories. Because in addition to my work with kids, I also work with very successful adults, and many of them come to me not because they're trying to make more money, it's because they have all the money they want, but they're really unhappy. And what I try to emphasize, Kimberly, is that success without happiness isn't success at all. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, parents want to instill in their kids all the qualities and the values, attributes, and the beliefs necessary to become successful, at least as defined by our Western achievement culture. But also, how can they be happy? Because, again, if people aren't happy, then all the success in the world probably isn't going to mean a whole lot.
Right. You mentioned in your book that child rearing a half century ago compared to today has changed. How has it changed?
Well, it's a lot harder because back 40, 50, 60 years ago, most of the forces in our culture and our society were supportive of kids, wanted to help them become happy and successful. But unfortunately, because of the increased role of wealth, status, and power, and of course the birth of the internet and social media, there's been a shift where kids now, a lot of the messages that kids are getting from outside the family aren't healthy. Mm-hmm. Whether it's win at all costs with youth sports, or I have to be beautiful and popular and cool from our popular culture. These messages they might to a degree cause kids to go down a road that might enable them to find some success, but it certainly isn't going to lead to happiness. And so it's just harder work these days because parents are almost alone, or only have sort of certain degrees of force compared to the powerful forces they're going up against with popular culture, with technology, and so on. And so really, it's that parents have to work so much harder to make sure their kids get the right messages in terms of values and attitudes and beliefs about themselves and the world that will lead them to become successful and happy.
In some cases, there are parents that push too hard. How do kids typically communicate when parents are pushing too hard?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing is that very often when parents push too hard, kids will sabotage themselves. They won't do well in school. They won't try as hard. And so then parents say, "Oh, you're so ungrateful," or "You're not working hard for all we do for you."
Mm-hmm.
But parents are missing the point, and so parents push harder and put more pressure on them and create higher expectations and more demands. And these parents are missing the point that when kids do engage in these self-sabotaging, these self-defeating behaviors, they're actually it's a cry for help, and that in fact, if parents do the exact opposite, if they take the pressure off, the kids actually will start to move forward. So if you think about it, here's a good metaphor. If you try to push somebody, their natural reaction is to push back. Mm-hmm. And so that's what kids do when parents push them too hard. And so if parents back off, and I've seen this so many times in my practice, if parents back off, then the kids will actually want to continue to go in the direction they're going. Because most often, ultimately what parents want their kids to experience in terms of success, for example, and the goals that they have for them are things that very often the kids want too.
Okay.
So when parents push so hard, not only is it self-defeating for the kids, but it's also self-defeating for the parents.
You make a point in your book that pushing our kids is a moral imperative. What happens if we don't push enough? Or what could happen?
Humans are fundamentally inertial creatures, meaning whatever state we're in, we're going to stay in. That's the state we'll stay in, meaning if an object at rest, this is the definition of inertia, an object at rest will stay at rest unless a force is exerted on it. And an object in motion will stay in motion on that trajectory unless a force is exerted on it. And so as inertial beings, kids will probably just sit on the sofa most of the time if they're not encouraged to do something else or, quote unquote, pushed to do something else. And so if our job as parents is to help raise kids who are healthy and confident and motivated and value-driven, then it's not going to happen. So to fulfill our moral imperative as parents, we need to create an environment and treat our kids in ways that will enable them to become the kind of kids and the kind of people that are generally admired and appreciated in our society.
You talk in your book about the 3 pillars of successful achievers, to use that as the foundation for success and happiness: self-esteem, ownership, and emotional mastery. As far as self-esteem goes, in what ways did we suddenly feel like we had to micromanage our kids' self-esteem?
Well, because in a way, parents started to lose trust that kids can find their own way. So, of course, we hear about helicopter parents, and now there's this new concept of snowplow parents, where parents are clearing the path. And of course, the worst case scenario of this is the scandal with the college admissions, where the parents just didn't believe that their kids could earn their way into some of these schools. And so, I think two things have happened over the last generation or two. Is first of all, there's a lot of parents in sort of the upper middle class and middle class demographics have a lot more free time. And so they can, and they don't have anything to do with that time. So they devote a lot of their energy toward their kids, and so their kids sort of become projects. So I'm gonna create my kid to be successful and get into the best colleges and get the good jobs. And with that, of course, with affluence comes having money to do that. And again, the college scandal is an extreme case of that. Also, it used to be that it was pretty much guaranteed that each subsequent generation would be better off than the previous generation in terms of quality of education, level of education, income, things like that. I think the current generation is the first where that's not the case. And so parents are in fear, economic fear, that their kids will not be able to get a job and support themselves when they get older. And fear, of course, drives parents to do kind of crazy things, and all people, in fact. So they've had to intrude on their kids' development and make sure that these things develop, like self-esteem, where self-esteem is basically the perception that a child is valued, loved, and accepted. And so basically just feel good about yourself. And if you have high self-esteem in general, you're more confident, you're more motivated, you perform better in school. A lot of research supporting these different areas. And so parents are afraid of taking the chance that if they don't get involved, then their kids won't develop self-esteem and all the benefits that accrue from that.
You mentioned that self-esteem has two parts and that parents have mastered the first part in making sure that our kids feel a sense of love and security, but that we need to work on the second part in allowing them a sense of competence and mastery. Explain that.
Right. So back in the 70s or 80s, during the birth of the so-called self-esteem movement, experts told parents, you got to make sure your kids feel good about themselves. So parents heaped on them love and validation and rewards and praise. So kids are constantly being told how wonderful they are and how they're the best and the most beautiful and the smartest and so on. So kids felt, they felt incredibly loved. And certainly feeling loved and secure and safe is one of the key components of self-esteem. But the other part that they forgot was what creates truly enduring self-esteem and strong self-esteem, and that's having kids develop a sense of competence and mastery. Mm-hmm. So because a big part of that is that kids feel like they have control over their world, that they have a sense of agency. The idea being, if they do good things happen. If they do bad things happen. And if they do nothing, nothing happens. But unfortunately, what's occurred these days is that kids develop the perception that whether they do good, bad, or nothing, they get what they want.
Okay.
And the problem with that then is that they don't actually develop the capabilities to act on the world. So it's one thing for parents to say, oh, you're so smart. But it's another thing to, are you willing to do the work to get good grades that are necessary for success academically? And so, yes, of course, kids want to be loved and valued, need to be loved and valued. But parents have taken away the sense of competence. And kids don't develop that sense of competence by being told how good they are. They develop that sense of competence by striving, working hard, struggling, experiencing failure. And from that, they learn that they're capable. And with that capability, then they're willing to do the work necessary that will ultimately enable them to become successful.
What do you mean when you tell us to be silent partners?
Yeah. So, and maybe silent partner is a bit of an overstatement, but parents need to be there early on to control kids' lives. When kids are 4, 5, 6 years old, they're not able to take control of their lives. But the role has to change as time goes by, from sort of boss, controller, to sort of manager, where, again, when kids are 7, 8, 9, there are a lot of things they're not ready to do yet, so parents need to take on those roles and manage them. But again, as you mentioned, what parents often do is start to micromanage. Mm-hmm. And micromanagement is basically doing things that the kids should be doing, but the parents don't trust that they'll do it. And they're not willing to let them have natural consequences because those consequences could have a dire impact on their entire futures. And I say that with, hopefully you can hear that in my tone, that I'm saying that a bit facetiously. Mm-hmm. And so go from managing to consulting, to guiding, to support, to just being there quietly, supporting your kids, and when they need their help, then they will come to you.
What are the 4 E's that you talk about in your book we should follow in helping them develop their confidence in an area?
Oh my God, Kimberly, I have no idea. I mean, can you remind me? Because I haven't read the book in a while. So.
The first one was to expose them to experiences,
right.
and to set high expectations as the second,
okay.
And promote effort and regular encouragement.
Okay, so let's start with the first E is exposure. You want to give your kids the opportunity to experience a lot of different things, because from that, a couple things happen. First of all, they find out what they're passionate about. They also find out what they're good at and what they will enjoy, so that can guide the direction they go in their lives. Second is expectations. That it's important to set certain types of expectations for kids. A problem that happens is that many times parents set unhealthy expectations. 2 types of unhealthy expectations. Ability expectations. We expect you to do well because you're so talented, because you're so smart. Problem is that kids can't control their ability. they're born with a certain level of intelligence or athletic or artistic ability. And so if they attribute their successes to innate ability, which you can't change, you can give kids more knowledge. You can't make them smarter. You can give them more skills. You can't make them more talented. Then if they fail, they get attributed to things they can't control. Again, their ability. And so I don't believe in ever creating expectations or praising behavior related to ability. Also, outcome expectations aren't healthy either, because kids might try really hard and not get the results they want because maybe they're not ready for it yet, they're not capable enough. Excuse me. Other kids did better, whatever it might be. So what's so important, and I think this is the third E's effort, that if you can instill in your kids the expectation that we expect you to give your best effort. Because the fact is that if kids give their best effort, they're going to do as well as they're capable of doing. Now, not every kid is capable of being a professional athlete or a virtuoso violinist or even getting straight A's in school. But if they learn the value of effort, they will be the best they can be. And ultimately, that's all they can do. And what was the fourth E?
Encouragement.
Encouragement, yes. So encouragement is not about telling them how wonderful they are or how successful or great they are. It's about providing support. It's about being there for them as a guide, as somebody who's going to give some good feedback. And so it's easy for parents, especially if they're super focused on results, to go negative, basically. Go to what I call the dark side if you're a Star Wars fan of the Force, and where they express disappointment. They criticize their children. And so the kids start viewing this whole their experience in a very negative way. And that affects their self-esteem. It'll affect their ownership and also their emotions, which I think we're going to get to shortly.
So you mentioned healthy expectations. Should that also include consequences?
Absolutely. Kids need to learn that their actions have consequences. If they, again, like I said before, if they do good things happen. If they do bad things happen. And so it's really important that parents do have consequences for their children. Now, they have to be appropriate, and they have to be very specific to whatever the transgression is or to what they did. So if you work hard, you get a degree of praise. You worked really hard out there. If they didn't work hard, well, they're going to see the natural consequences of their behavior in terms of maybe poor grades or not making the team or what have you.
Explain false self versus true self.
Yes, this is one of the most powerful ones, is that as kids develop, as we all develop, we develop a perception of ourselves. Now, in an ideal world, that perception of ourselves is an accurate representation of who we are, our personality, our temperament, our capabilities, and that creates a congruence in how we perceive ourselves and how we act on the world. Unfortunately, especially these days with the internet and with social media, kids I see so often develop a false sense of themselves. That is, a sense of self that's not aligned with who they really are. So, for example, kids these days, they post all this positive information and photos on their social media, when maybe, in fact, they're not particularly happy or they're not all that wonderful in various ways. But they put it up there because they're trying to manage their other people's perceptions of them. And what this does is, or a kid who's maybe really artistic and doesn't really want to go into business or law or whatever the way his or her parents want them to, but they take this on, and so they create this persona based upon expectations, perceptions, beliefs that their parents that they think will make their parents happy. And what that does, it creates a tremendous amount of internal conflict between the way they're told, they tell themselves they have to think and feel and behave, and with compared to how they really think, feel, and behave. And that creates a lot of, again, internal conflict that can lead to tremendous unhappiness.
Pillar 2 is ownership. Why is ownership important in raising a successful achiever?
Yeah, ownership is absolutely essential because ultimately, at some point, the kids are going to leave the house and go out on their own. And if they are not doing things because of what they want to do, because they value it, because they believe in it, then when the parents are no longer around, they're going to stop doing it. Unfortunately, these days, as I touched on earlier, a lot of parents just don't trust their kids to do what's necessary. So parents end up owning their activities. They're making sure they're doing their homework. Sometimes they're doing their homework for them. They're telling them what they need to do and how to do it. And the problem with that, of course, is that I use a metaphor of which do you treat better, the car you own or the car you rent? Well, of course, the car you own. Why? Because it's yours. And there's an expression I use called pride in ownership. It's a fairly well-known term, and what it means is basically you care about what you're doing. It means something to you. And things that you care about, you put your best effort into it because it's important to you. And so an essential part of raising kids is instilling in them ownership in their lives. Now, it starts off small, but over time, as kids get older and they're more capable of gaining that ownership, whether it's their schedule with school, homework, activities, doing the work necessary if there's a lot of homework, for example, or a big project coming up, making good decisions. All these things are tied in with the perception that I'm doing this because this is my thing, not my parents', and because this is important to me. And so, again, kids are going to do things that are important to them. Whereas if they don't have ownership and they're doing it because their parents want them to do it, well, they'll put in some effort and maybe a lot because they're afraid of their parents. But ultimately, it probably isn't going to work out because at some point their parents aren't going to be around and the kids aren't going to want to do it, and it can ruin relationships between your kid and you because kids are angry at and resent being forced to do things that they don't own. And the end game is they don't become very successful because they're not doing something that they own and that's consistent with their true self.
As parents, you mentioned that we often inappropriately push as the result of not addressing our own inadequacies. What are some ways parents hamper or unknowingly sabotage their children in terms of ownership?
Yeah, well, one of the great joys in life is experiencing your kids' successes and also in a way sharing their failures and their sadness. But when parents become overly invested in their kids' activities, what that means is their self-esteem becomes too connected to how their kids perform. Mm. So when the kids take an exam or go out on the soccer field or go onto the stage to perform, the kids have the burden of how their parents will feel about themselves on their shoulders. And that creates an immense amount of pressure on them. It's a burden. It's like putting on a 50-pound weight vest before running out onto the soccer field. And so when parents are overly invested, the chance of failure becomes so threatening that they have to, by gosh, make sure that their kids do well. So they push them. And you see this in sports, the Little League parents, where the kids, you better go out there and win. Right. And when they don't, parents are really angry with them. I worked with a young rising star tennis player a number of years ago where after a tournament where the girl didn't play that well, mm-hmm. She lost early, the mom smashed all 5 of her rackets.
Wow.
Another time she abandoned her at a tournament and drove 500 miles to her sister. Another time she didn't literally speak to her for 2 weeks. Hmm. Now, this kind of behavior is rare, but this is not black and white. This is a matter of a continuum. So the way I put it is that all parents are well-intentioned. They want what's best for their kids. Some are misguided, and a few are mentally ill. And I say that somewhat facetiously, but it's so important for parents to be aware of what their needs are, why they're pushing their kids. Because here's another really important point is kids will accept parents pushing them if they feel that pushing is in the kid's best interest. It's to help the kid get where they want to go. But kids have tremendous sensors, if you will, for when their parents' needs are being met. So when kids sense that their parents are pushing them for the parents' own needs of inadequacy or I wasn't successful or I wasn't accepted when I was young, mm-hmm. kids sense that, and they're going to push back. And the best way to push back for a parent who needs, capital N-E-E-D-S, needs their kids to be successful, is to do what? Not be successful, right. Not work hard. And so it's self-defeating in several ways. The kids aren't successful. It doesn't meet the parents' needs. And so that's why, for me, it's so important that parents look in the mirror. As we're all human beings. We all have baggage. We all have challenges from our upbringing. One of the greatest gifts we can give our kids is not our baggage. Mm-hmm. They'll get their own. That's part of life. But make sure, as parents, that we look in the mirror and say, why am I doing this? Is it for my needs or my kids' needs? And if your kids' needs, awesome. And again, kids are going to sense that. But if it's your needs, if this is about you as parents, then you probably need to talk to somebody professionally. Otherwise, it's not going to turn out well.
Explain the significance of goal setting.
Yeah. So we are, I think, hardwired to strive. Whether it's Manifest Destiny in America's movement to the West Coast, or our desire to become the best we can be in anything we do. But motivation is one thing, but it's another thing to get there. So you can think of a metaphor. You might really want to go to Denver, just making that up. Well, that motivation, that drive to go to Denver has very little value if you don't know how to get there. Mm-hmm. And that's where goals come in. Goals are road signs. They're the GPS navigation to where you ultimately want to go. So for kids, it's about setting goals of what do I need to achieve along this way to get where I want to go. And some of those goals can be things in terms of a certain GPA or get into a certain kind of college or what have you. But it's also other kind of goals, what I call process goals. That is, what do I need to do to get those outcome goals, to get those results I need? I need to work hard. I need to budget my time. I need to manage all my activities well. But kids aren't naturally great at setting goals specifically, so that's where parents can come in, and helping them set goals that will help them achieve their ultimate goals.
You have one child who is, one child is contingent and one that's independent. That requires a different approach. Explain the difference and how to approach each.
Yeah, so a contingent child is one who really depends upon the parents to get anything done. And whether it's in terms of goal setting or time management or different activities they participate in or being praised and rewarded. Whereas another kid is they just sort of have their own thing going on. And it's interesting. So since I wrote Positive Pushing, I've made some changes a little bit in the terminology and what underlies it, in that there's a big push these days to create independent children. You need to prepare them for the real world, so let's get them out the door, have them be on their own, hang out with their friends. And because we don't want them to become contingent or dependent upon us. But I've come to the conclusion that I don't want to raise independent children. Because the fact is, we are social beings, and we need to be connected to someone or something. And if we push our kids out the door and say, you're on your own, you're independent, they're going to seek out attachment from other sources. Mm-hmm. And because we as human beings, we need to feel attached. It helps us feel safe and connected and a part of something. The problem is that the two main sources of attachment outside of the family are peers and popular culture. Let's start with popular culture. Mm-hmm. Popular culture doesn't give, I'm going to try not to swear here, doesn't care at all about our kids. All popular culture cares about is making money. Yep. And so if your kid's attached to popular culture, and the messages from popular culture these days are, in my view, absolutely horrific and unhealthy. Mm-hmm. So if your kid's attached to popular culture, it's not going to end well. As far as peers, not quite as bad, but ultimately even your kids' friends care mostly about themselves. Mm-hmm. And as we well know, kids are not always the best role models. So I don't want my kids to be independent. I want them to be self-reliant, and this is the terminology I use. Self-reliant means they're capable of taking care of themselves. They have the skills and the beliefs and the attitudes necessary to survive out there in the wild, such as it is these days. But they still are attached to us. And this is where I really have pushed back a lot, and also in raising my own kids, mm-hmm. that I want to stay attached to my kids. So I'm going to be involved in their decisions. I'm going to set limits. I'm going to set boundaries. I'm going to have healthy expectations for them. And it's interesting because in my practice, I see this a lot where kids will say, my parents would sort of just let me do whatever I want. Mm. But kids these days still want guidance because, again, these days, kids down to 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, they walk, talk, act, and dress like little adults, but they're not. They're still just immature, unprepared, unskilled little beings who are thrown into a very scary world. And the world these days is way more complicated than it used to be, thanks to technology. And so it's finding a balance between keeping attached and having them rely on you to some degree, but not being contingent, meaning really dependent upon you. And at the other end of the continuum, which is also bad, where they're just on their own, when they're really not ready to be on their own. And again, as my clients have said many times to me, I wish my parents would set limits for me. I wish they would provide guidance. Sometimes I wish they would tell me what to do, because I don't know what to do. But again, the messages from popular culture, from our parenting culture is, let them go out there, let them figure things out.
Wow. So pillar 3, emotional mastery. You mentioned that children react when they experience success and failure. It's linked to how we respond to their experiences. If we're negative or if we're inappropriate, over time they see achievement as an emotional threat instead of an emotional challenge. Explain emotional threat versus emotional challenge.
Yeah. If I could boil down to a simple distinction, what enables kids to become successful in whatever their endeavor is, and those who don't, it's do they perceive the situation as a threat or a challenge? So let's use the example of a presentation to a class. A class, they have to give a little presentation on some particular topic. If their parents are overly invested, if they have a fear of failure, or they're perfectionist, they're going to perceive that situation, that presentation, as a threat. Meaning, if they're going to be focused on what bad things could happen. If I fail, what if? And that triggers all kinds of physiological, psychological, and emotional reactions that interfere. So a kid before an exam, before a presentation, before a sporting event, before a recital, if they experience emotional threat, they're going to be scared. They're going to be afraid. And what are they afraid of? The bad consequences if things don't work out well. And, of course, in that state of negativity, of heightened physiological activation, they are less likely to perform well. And it becomes self-fulfilling, and they end up failing, which is the thing they feared in the most in the first case. So one of the greatest things kids can develop, and this comes from parents, teachers, and coaches, is see challenging situations, difficult situations, as challenges to pursue. Because when somebody's threatened, the natural reaction is to run away. But the challenge, the natural reaction, is to pursue, to have confidence, to be motivated, to maybe have the little butterflies in the stomach, but be pretty excited, and to be super focused. And because if you think about, let's say, a tennis match, two players of fairly equal ability. One perceives the match as a threat. Oh my gosh, what if I lose? The other thinks emotional challenge. Oh man, what a great opportunity here. Let's bring it on. Assuming equal ability, who's more likely to be successful in the match? Clearly the one who sees it as emotional challenge, because all the bad psychological, emotional, physical stuff that is present with emotional threat is the exact opposite. It's all positive physical, emotional, and psychological with a challenge. And that creates the stage for them to do the very best they can.
So you described a child that has a fear of failure, but there's also, as you mentioned in your book, a fear of success. Success. Explain that.
Yeah. So fear of failure is epidemic in our culture. Because it used to be that if you got B's, you could go out, get into a decent college and get a degree and get a decent job. These days, the perception is that a B plus is like an F. That failure is just the worst thing in the world, and the bar is set so high these days. All the messages from popular culture is you got to be the best, you got to be number one, you got to go to the best colleges, all these things, and that sets kids up for failure because not everybody has those capabilities to be the very, very best, and there's a much smaller window of success. And so what happens is kids develop this fear of failure. And I should say that also fear of success is ultimately a fear of failure, because kids fear success because the higher up they get, the more likely they're going to fail. So I see kids with such a profound fear of failure where they're not focused on success at all. They're not striving for success. Their overall goal in life is to avoid failure. because there's some fascinating research on fear of failure that has shown that when kids are afraid of failure, they're really afraid of the meaning they attach to failure. And this research has shown the most common sources of failure, of fear of failure, of the consequences, is my parents won't love me. And I know it's hard for parents to believe that, but I see that in kids all the time in my practice. My parents won't love me. My friends won't like me. I'll be a failure all my life. I'll never achieve any of my goals. It'll all have been a waste of time. And the typical reaction with a fear of failure is to avoid failure. And one way to avoid failure is to quit or not try.
Mm-hmm.
And then even if you don't try, well, you still fail, but you have an excuse. And that excuse protects you. It's like, I would have done well, so you still have to love me. I'm still a good person. But all these things came up. And so fear of failure is for kids, it's like a mountain lion that's chasing them. And if the mountain lion catches them, what's it going to do, Kimberly? Well, of course, it's going to eat them.
Right.
Well, what I try to convince people, kids, is that failure is not a mountain lion. It's a kitty cat. Now, can a kitty cat hurt you? Sure. It can scratch and bite you, but will it kill you? No. And so much of my work with kids these days is helping them to recognize that if they fail, they'll still be okay. And that actually failure is essential. The most successful people in the history of the world failed frequently and monumentally on the way to success. And if I can take away that fear of failure, kids are liberated to be the best they can be because nothing's going to hold them back.
So I'm a mother of two, how can I help my kids develop a positive emotional response to achievement?
Wow, yeah. Most powerfully, you have a positive emotional response to achievement because at soccer games, you see it all the time. The kids lose the game, and the parents are apoplectic. They're so upset. And kids see that and go, oh, my gosh, I lost, and I made my parents really upset. And especially if the parents are really upset at the kids. How could you have done that? How could you have lost that? How could you have gotten a B on that test? What's wrong with you?
Right.
Talk about creating a fear of failure. Talk about a negative emotional reaction. Every time I go in to take an exam or walk on the soccer field, I'm putting my parents' love for me is on the line. And you could say, well, of course I love my kids. But when you're mad at your kids, do you think they feel loved? No.
Right.
And kids can't see the difference between, oh, my parents are disappointed in me versus, oh my gosh, I lost and my parents don't love me. So it starts with being a good role model. For parents, if kids got a B or a C or even worse, staying calm. Okay, so let's explore this. Or that must have been really disappointing. Let's see if we can figure out what happened here. On the soccer field, win, lose, or draw. Best thing to say after a game or whatever the sport is, I love you. You hungry? You're not making that big a deal about it.
Right.
So if you're positive and calm in the face of failure, and also positive and calm when they're really successful, because one thing I see so often is I see kids. Let's say, again, I keep picking on soccer, but it's very popular. I see parents who, after a game, they are so bummed out if the kids lose, and if they win, they're unbelievably excited, more so than the kids. Because kids are incredibly resilient. They'll be bummed out for a minute or two, then they're off playing cards with their friends.
Right.
But parents are like, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing in the world. Or they win, and they win the game, and the kids are excited for a few minutes, and it's like, let's go home. Where the parents are like, yeah, they're out of control. It's a great little red flag, Kimberly. If you're more excited than your kids, if you're more dejected than your kids after a success or a failure, respectively, that's a big red flag.
So what advice do you give parents in creating a solid foundation for raising a successful, happy achiever?
It kind of goes back to what I just said, is it starts with you.
Okay.
What are the messages you're sending to your kids? And this is actually the topic of, I think it's my second or third parenting book, Your Children Are Listening. But kids are being bombarded by messages 24/7 from parents, from peers, from teachers, from coaches, from popular culture, from social media. And my basic thesis is that kids become the messages they get the most. Kids become the messages they get the most. So if they're being given, and by the way, parents are the most powerful source of messaging. And parents, I believe, need to really own that and take responsibility and recognize that influence, because if they can send positive messages to their kids, then their kids are going to get those messages. And when I say positive messages, I don't mean you're wonderful, you're fabulous. It means expressing love, setting healthy expectations, having consequences. It means for parents doing what they believe is best for their kids, not what's easy or comfortable, but what is best for them. So it all starts with parents looking in the mirror and seeing what they bring to the table as parents. And again, we're all human beings, and making sure that most of the messages that their kids are getting from us are the ones that are healthy, will help them become, in fact, successful and happy.
I came up with 4 scenarios, and I want to get your advice on the 4. The first one is a yay or nay. Telling your child that before a basketball game, a sport that they show mediocre interest, that you will reward them with $5 for every successful shot. Yay or nay?
A qualified yay. There is some evidence that bribery is a useful tool for initiating behavior, meaning to get kids to try new things.
Mm-hmm.
Bribery is not a useful tool to motivate kids over the long run. And there's a huge body of research suggesting that extrinsically motivating kids reduces intrinsic motivation.
Okay. I actually do that. I started doing that with my daughter when she started playing basketball, and she was kind of on the fence about it, and to get her motivated, I offered that to her. And now that she loves basketball, she actually came to me and said, you don't have to do that anymore. I really love the game, which I thought was really great.
This is good, because ultimately what the bribery does is gets kids to do it. And hopefully they'll do it and go, actually like to do it. I don't need the $5. And that's exactly what happened with your daughter.
So number 2, your 10-year-old wants to try lacrosse. Mid-season, they decide they don't want to do it after you've bought all of that equipment. Do you allow them to quit mid-season, or do you tell them that they have to finish the season and try something else afterwards?
Absolutely have to finish the season, unless there's something truly aversive about the experience, because there's an important value lesson learned here, and that's commitment. That if you commit to something, you have to finish it out. Also, it's not just a commitment on their part. You bought the equipment, you paid the registration, you drive them to practice, you watch the uniforms. This is a commitment. This is a family commitment, really. And one of the great lessons, and I think I talk about this in Positive Pushing, it's that sometimes in life, kids just need to suck it up.
Right.
That there are a lot of things in life that aren't fun. We don't always like getting up at 5 in the morning and taking our kids to soccer practice or whatever it might be, or driving 6 hours to get somewhere. We do it as parents because that's the job. Well, for kids also, they need to learn that there are a lot of things in life, it's not all fun and games. But they still need to do it because that's part of the job, whatever it might be, whether it's doing the dishes or or they have to mow the lawn or whatever it might be.
Number 3, your 9th grader has a high aptitude for writing. Her teacher suggests that she be placed in an advanced placement class or AP class. She enjoys writing but is not interested in being placed in that class, perhaps because she has a fear of success or failure. How do you handle that?
Yeah, I would suggest that encourage her to take the class and try it out, because kids often make determinations about whether they like something or not before they even try it, and whether that's a piece of food or an activity. And I'm a big believer in helping kids, especially if they have an aptitude for an activity, to experience it, and then they can make an informed decision. So I would say strongly encourage them to take the class, and after the semester, if they don't like it, they don't have to take it anymore. But at least they know, because very often kids will force their kids to do something early on because they say they won't like it, and they do it, and like your daughter's basketball, they end up really enjoying it.
Okay, and number 4, your 6th grader plays an organized sport. He's been playing on a team for a few years. He loves it. This season, he gets a coach that's giving him a lot less playing time. He's riding the pine. He wants to give up. What do you say?
Well, again, it goes to commitment, and it goes to as part of the process. If he wants to get off the bench, maybe he needs to work harder. Maybe he needs to get some extra practice time. But also that part of becoming better at the best you can be at anything, it's not a linear trajectory. There's a lot of ups and downs. And a lot of the best athletes in the world sat on the bench initially before they got their moment, and they took advantage of it. And so I'm a big believer in encouraging them to stay involved and just keep playing hard and try to earn the spot on the starting lineup.
Dr. Taylor, thank you so much for being a guest on Raising Mommy. Thanks for providing us with some advice and some strategies for raising successful and happy children.
Great pleasure, Kimberly. Great fun talking to you.
You can get your copy of the book Positive Pushing on Amazon.com or Dr. Taylor's website at drjimtaylor.com. There you can also check out his blog and online courses and other books like Raising Generation Tech, Raising Young Athletes, and Your Children Are Listening. I actually want to get Your Children Are Listening next. I'd like to end today's podcast with what you suggested that parents post or put on the refrigerator as a reminder of our parental goals. These are 8 beliefs that we want to instill in our children. The first, I am loved. The second, I am capable. Number 3, it is important to try. Number 4, I am responsible for my day. Number 5, it is okay to make mistakes. Number 6, I can handle things when they go wrong. Number 7, I enjoy what I do. And number 8, I can change. Be sure to find Raising Mommy anywhere you listen to podcasts. Check out new episodes every Saturday. Follow us on Twitter at RaisingMommyGA. Search for me on Facebook and Instagram at eatplantsforlife.com or Raising Mommy Podcast. Email me at raisingmommy@appenmediagroup.com to share the random, fun, and sweet things that your kids say, text, or do for our Off the Cuff Kids segment. Remember, first names only, and please include the age or grade of your child. If you have a screenshot of the text or note or the photo of the deed, please also include it in your submission. As always, thanks for listening.